Vyas, and this video is a collaboration with Programming Knowledge. Welcome to the Springboot and JUnit playlist where we are going to understand how unit testing works when we are writing a REST API application. Sorry. So, in the previous video, we had talked about what testing is, why do we actually need to write tests for our software. We talked about the theoretical bits where we talked about the terminology. We talked about what is unit testing, what is performance testing, what is integration testing. We also talked about why we need to write tests inside our applications. And we also had developed our simple REST API runner where we had our dependencies installed and also had some simple REST API up and running. In this video, we are going to jump inside JUnit and see how JUnit works. So JUnit is a popular unit testing framework in the Java ecosystem, and we'll be using JUnit 5. And let's see how all of this works. So first, as I said, we need to have some conventions. So we need to understand some conventions when we are writing tests. We need to write our tests inside the test folder inside Java, and here you need to have a Java class which will basically have a name. Now when you are writing a test class, the class name must end with test so that we know that it's a test class. So here let's just say JUnit example test, and now we have a class ready to be tested. Now let's basically first see how everything works here. So all we have to do is do iterate test, and let's just say void demo test method. And here what we can do is assert true and just do true. And let's import assert true now. So more actions, import static method from JUnit. Okay, so now we have a simple test which basically is which passes no matter what happens. Now let's just run this test and see how it looks like. So when you run this class, we want to see what happens, right? We want to see what are we actually doing behind the scenes, or what is happening, and how do we actually check whether the test passed or the test failed. So this one has to pass by default because we are asserting true and it is true. So our test failed, and now we need to see why it failed. So it should be public. So we'll do a public void test method, and let's run it again. So now when you slowly see, you'll slowly understand how it is working. So we wrote a test, the test failed, and we exactly knew what was wrong with the test. There was no public, and the test has to be public. Now that way we can use our test to understand what is wrong with our code. So now as you can see, we have a part. We pass a test, and when we pass a test, we get nothing in the console. That tells us that everything was running smoothly, and we don't have to worry about anything that is happening. Okay, great. Now let's actually write some good tests. Not something like this. Let's go inside our application, create a new class. Let's say calculator. Simple examples because we're just learning how unit testing works. So a very simple example, a calculator. This will have a method, so public int multiply. We are multiplying two numbers, and now we just return a b. Now this is a very simple example, and you might think that this is not worthy enough for a test because what are we doing? We're just multiplying two numbers. But let's just start with simple examples to understand how the framework is and what the framework does, and then we will add some real life examples with the REST API application. So bear with me for these tests. They look very simple, I understand, but we will slowly go inside the good ones, the good tests. Okay, So when you have a class, we need to write tests for that class. So let's go inside Java and do another one. So we do calculator test, and this class will have all of our tests for the calculator class. Now we need to test the calculator class, so we need that inside our calculator. Now we haven't initialized this yet, right? So we need to initialize this before we we go inside our tests, right? So here, as you can see, this is a test. Our test will be method. So before we go inside this method, we want our calculator class to be initialized. So JUnit provides you with an annotation called as before each. So before each test that we write, do this, and this is going to be a void, a setup method. So let's set up our testing environment, and all we do is we do calculator equal to new calculator, and that's it. We have our calculator class initialized for our testing environment. Now we can start with our tests. So first, we need to do a simple test, right? A simple test that we know. So let's just write test. Let's import the class from JUnit, and this will be void test multiply. A simple test, nothing complicated here, pretty straightforward. And all we do is assert equals, and our output will be 20. And when we do a calculator dot multiply, when we multiply 4 and 5, we get the output as 20. Let's again import the static methods. Okay, so as you can see, we are doing a calculator multiply from 4 and 5, and we expect 20 to be the answer, and we do 1 equals test here. Pretty simple, straightforward. Let's make this public because we don't want the same errors again. So public. Yep. So a pretty simple test. Let's see what happens here, and we'll do a run for our test. You can also run an individual test, but we'll just run the entire class because why not? So the test failed because we got a null pointer exception, and now let's see why that is. So let's go ahead and see what was wrong again. So at line 18, so now calculator was null, and we need to see why that was. So let's skip this for now, and we'll do calculator equal to new calculator here, and then we can test it again. And the test is passed. So before each had some problems there, but we can worry about that later when we're done. But we just want to show you how testing something looks like, and here we saw that clearly with our calculator multiply test. Now let's do this again. Now we'll do the same thing, but we want to test with a different number. So if we do our test multiply different parameters, and let's say we want 5 into 5, which is going to be 25, or so yeah, let's test this now. Let's write 2 tests and see what happens. And both the tests pass. Pretty straightforward, nothing magical happening here. And what you should notice here is that nothing is changing here, only the values are changing, right? So we don't need a different test scenario or test case for this. This can basically be inside the same test. So we have an assert equal, and we do another assert equal, and here we do 5, 5, and the expected is going to be 25. Great. Let's run the test again. So let's remove breakpoints for now and just run the test. Yeah, now you see what happens. Now that we have done this, let's actually see what happens when we fail a test. So now let's just say we expect this to be 10 because we don't know what 4 into 5 is. And let's say we just put, we just put this by mistake, or some other developer by mistake had changed the value here, and he doesn't know anything about it. But now if he does that, it messes up the test. And how does he know that? So when the continuous integration deployment pipeline runs our test, the build system, it will fail this particular test, and we will see how that is. So this is how it looks like. The test failed. The expected was 10, and what it found was 20 by the value, so it failed. And that is how we know that a tests are passing or they are failing. Now all we have to do here is change it to 20, and we will be back with our tests. And yeah, we are back to it. Now, we haven't tested our code out properly, right? We have done an A into B, but what if we do an A divided by B? So if we have another method here. So let's just say divide, and we do A by B. Now, how does that work? How does that happen? And let's see how this works as well. So now let's write another test. So we can call this test divide, spell it correctly. Does the same thing, and all we do is divide, and let's say divide 4 by 2, and the expected is 2. Let's run the test now. And the test passed. Now this would make you seem that our calculator is pretty well functioning. It is doing what it has to do. It is dividing and multiplying. But what happens when you divide by 0? Because that is an edge case that we need to understand and we need to handle. So let's just see what happens here. So if somebody application is using a calculator and he divides by 0, we need to tell him something. We need to give him something. So here we say test failed and arithmetic divided by 0. Now we can write test cases where we handle this, but we will look into that in the upcoming videos with the REST applications. So this video was basically an introduction of how the JUnit framework is, and some big examples where we understand how JUnit works. And from the next video, we are going to start building our REST API application, and then start writing unit tests for it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.